Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day today. And in today's video, it's going to be pretty exciting. It's going to be making a simple website using user authentication. So let's take a look. At the end of this website, you'll be able to make or even use the user authentication as we have here. So as you can see, if we go to our sign up page, it'll take us directly to our sign up page where we can just input any email that we'd like. So if we go ahead at test.com, username, you can make anything as well, and then password also. Your password gets hashed, that way it's kept safe. You hit the sign up button, you get registration successful. Hit OK, and as you just saw, you'll be taken right to the login page. Now with those same credentials that you just created, you can use it to sign in. So let's go do that. Test and then password. We hit the login and login successful. Now we hit OK, and as you can see, you'll be redirected to the account page. And not to worry, your account page is going to be protected. And now you can go to whatever website that you decide, or any link or any other page that you have in your website, and you'll still be logged in until you log out. So if you log out, as you can see, you'll be redirected right to the login page. So guys, let's get started. So now that we are all ready to rock and roll, the first thing that we're going to want to do is open up your IDE or your Visual Studio Code. And once you have it open, the second thing that we're going to want to do is create a file in our desktop, and that file or that folder that we create, it can be named whatever you like. But basically, the reason why we are creating that folder is so that we can store our project inside of it. So once you have it created, what you're going to do is just drag and drop it right into your IDE or Visual Studio Code. And once you have it dragged and dropped, you'll see something like this. It'll say Open Editors, and right underneath it, you should see the name of your folder that you just created and dragged and dropped inside of your Visual Studio Code. And mine just says auth user YouTube. Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to create two folders, and our two folders are going to be our backend, where we are going to store all of our backend related files and folders. And the second one is going to be our front end, where we are going to store all of our front end files and folders. So the way we go about doing so is if you go into your terminal here, new terminal, you should see it pop up. And inside of the terminal, you can just type in mkdir and then the name of your folder that you want to name it. So we'll name this backend, just like that. And this is the way you create a folder. If you click enter, you'll see that it was created here. And then we can go ahead and do that for our front end. So we can type in mkdir front end and then hit enter. And as you can see, it was also created. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we are going to focus on setting up and pretty much making our backend server. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into the backend server folder, and by doing so, we're going to just type in cd backend or change directory into your backend. So once you hit enter, you'll see that this here, the name of your folder where your project goes into, is going to change to your backend here. So if you hit enter, as you can see, it's changed. So definitely just make sure that it changed for you as soon as you hit enter. So remember, it's cd space backend, because if not, then whatever you install is going to be outside of here and it's not going to work with your server. And it's going to lead to some problems down the road. So definitely just double and triple check that it says backend here. Awesome. Now we are going to do two things here. And the first one is we are going to initialize our backend folder, in which we are going to create our package.json file, in which will show all of our dependencies that we install. So we go about doing so, we type in the command line npm init space --y. If you hit enter, you'll see pretty much this here, the name, the version description, main scripts. And then if you look to the top here, you have your package.json file. Now the second thing that we're going to want to do is create our server.js file. And in order to create it, we're going to go back into our command line and we're going to type in touch and the name of the file, server.js. And remember, this is to create a file. So we can just hit enter. And then as you can see, it was created. And this is on a Mac, but on Windows, I believe it's code and then the name of the file that you're looking to create, which is server. Okay, perfect. So now that we have our package.json and our server.js file created, we are going to install our dependencies. And for our dependencies, I'll just list them for now. That way, once we are importing them, I'll explain what they each do. and how they're going to help us. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to type in npm I or npm install, and then the first one is going to be Express. Second is going to be Mongoose. The third one is going to be cores. The fourth one is going to be body parser, just like that. The fifth one is going to be Nodemon. The sixth one is going to be Bcrypt. And the seventh one is going to be JSON Web Token, just like that. Once you have them typed out, you can just hit enter and just wait until they install. It should take just a few seconds here. Perfect. So it looks like they were installed. And now if you go into your package.json file, you'll see that they were installed. So you have the dependencies, and underneath you have your Bcrypt body parser cores with their current versions here. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is, in order to use them, we have to import them. So going about importing them, what we're going to do is we're going to make them pretty much into a variable that says require. So we're going to import our Express to start off. So we're going to say const Express equals require parentheses, and inside of the parentheses you're going to have your double or single quotes, whichever works fine, and then you're going to type in Express, just like that. And then the second one, we are going to import our Mongoose. So we're going to say const Mongoose equals require Mongoose, just like that. And as you can see, at times you'll have the autofill, and you can just click it and it'll autofill pretty fast there, and so on and so forth, which is pretty easy to do. So again, we're going to say const cores this time equals require, and then cores. So now let's just finish off with what we need. We're going to have const body parser, const require Bcrypt, and lastly we have const JSON Web Token, but instead we can just type out JWT equals require and then JSON Web Token, just like that. So now that we have all of our dependencies installed and imported, what they each do is pretty interesting. So your Express is going to help you set up your server, is going to help your server here. Mongoose is going to pretty much make it easy to make our schemas and connect to our MongoDB or our database. The next one is going to be cores, in which is when we are connecting into our database or our API, it'll help minimize any errors. The next is body parser, in which is going to help parse our data into JSON. And now the two here that we have are quite interesting for our sign-in, for our user authentication, which is Bcrypt, in which is will hash our password. That way it'll hide our password. And then lastly, the JWT or the JSON Web Token it'll be a token that follows the user as soon as they gets created, as soon as the user signs in, and pretty much follows them around. And when they sign out, it'll be removed or it'll be deleted. And next time they sign back in, it'll be created once again. Basically, it's like a session. Perfect. And now the last thing that we're going to do here is we're just going to, what I like to do at times is I like to just type out what I'm going to do for future reference. So we can just start by just having and commenting it out here. And then we're going to connect to Express app. The next one is connect to MongoDB. Then we are going to have our middleware. Then comes our schema. And lastly, our routes. Just like that. Perfect. So now that we have this, what you want to do is you want to start up the server. And remember how I mentioned when we installed Nodemon, and let me see if we installed it. I don't think actually we do have it. Sorry, I just forgot it there, but we do have Nodemon installed. And pretty much what Nodemon does is whenever you make any updates inside of your server, your main server.js file, you'll have to have the server on, and then you're going to have to kill it and then turn it back on, kill it with every single update, and so on and so forth. So what Nodemon does is pretty cool. It automatically does it for us. That way we don't have to go through the repetition of turning it on, off, on, off, on, off. Okay? And you'll see throughout the whole video how it works, which is pretty cool. And it helps us with any errors. So if there are any errors, what Nodemon is going to do, it's going to pretty much kill the server until we fix that error. And once we fix that error, it'll automatically turn the server back on. Perfect. So in order to use NodeMon, we can just come into our command line and we can just type in npx NodeMon and then the name of our file, which is server.js, and we can just type in server. So once you hit enter, you'll see this here. It'll say starting node server. Now we can go ahead and check it as well, and how we check it is we want to make sure that we are connecting to our Express app. So we can do so by doing this. We can just type in const app equals express and then parentheses like you're calling it. Okay, and then now if we wanted to test out, we can just type in app.listen, and then in parentheses we're going to have the port number that we want to use, and for this case we're using port number 3001. So what this is saying is we are using the Express app, and for future reference as well, definitely keep in mind this. So whenever you see app, it means the Express app. So we're using the Express app to listen to the port that's inside of here to make sure that it's open, that way we can connect to it. So we're telling it that we want to use port 3001, and the port, you can definitely use whichever port you like. It can be 4000, 4001, 4050, 5000, 6000, 7000, 8000, and whichever number you'd like. But just remember and try to not have any of the port numbers that you choose interfere with any other port numbers that you're currently using. So for example, I do know that when it comes to React, normally the default for a port for React is 3000. So if you're using port 3000, when you start up your React server, just make sure that that's changed to a different server, because if not, then it's just going to create some conflict. So let's just go ahead and change this back to 3001 since that's what we're going to be using, and we can go ahead and take a look here. So if we go into our Google Chrome or any browser of your choosing, you can just go to error. You can just go to localhost 3001, and then you can see that it's working. And whenever you see the page like this, it'll pretty much be like a blank white page that has cannot get / that means it's working. So if you wanted to take a look, we can just put it there. And then let's say if you accidentally misspelled app, you put apps, right? As you can see, it tells you app crashed, which means that NodeMon is cleaning the server. So if we go ahead and refresh the page, it says site can't be reached because we cannot connect to the server. And the cool thing about NodeMon is if you scroll a little up, you'll see that it's telling you where and what it is, what the problem is, or what the error is. So it's pointing to this part, the APSP, and then saying that APSP is not defined. And as normal with everything, you have to define it in order to use it. So you can just go ahead and take out the S, and then it'll say that it's your back up and running. And now if we go back to our browser and we just refresh it, you can see that we are back up and running. Okay, which is the pretty cool thing about NodeMon. So now that we have finished setting up our Express app, the next thing that we're going to do is set up our MongoDB and then connect to it. So if you can just go to MongoDB's website, and if you don't have an account, please feel free to create the account. It's free. And once you have created the account, the next thing that you're going to want to do is you'll be taken to this projects here, and then you can just go to a new project. Then you can just name it whatever you like. So for this video, we'll call it or users auth, and then you can hit next. And then once you hit next, you can just press create a project, and then just let that load. So perfect. So once it's loading, or then it takes you to the next page, it'll be loading for a bit. But what you can do in the meantime is you can see if you can build a database, and then if you're able to, you can just hit free here out of these options, and you can just scroll down, and everything's already going to be at default, so you can just leave it as it is. But I'm just going to change this to cluster 10, cluster 30. And the region you want to be able to choose what's nearest to you. Okay, so we can just click on create, and it'll take us to our security quick start page here, in which this is where we are going to enter our username and our password that we're going to use for our connection string. So I already have mine, so we're just going to go down here. So once you create your username and password and hit create user, it'll take you to this here, right here, my local environment. So you can just click on my local environment since that's what we're gonna be using. And then for your IP address, you can either enter it manually, or you can just click on add my current IP address and it'll add it for you automatically. And then if you scroll down, you should see like a submit or continue or finish. And then once you finish that, you should be pretty good to go. But just remember just to make sure that you do have your username and your password, because you definitely want to be connecting to this username and password. So you can go to your database here, and you can just wait it out because it's going to take a few minutes, maybe 1 to 5 minutes. Normally it takes about 5 minutes or even more at times. But if you do see it loading still after like 5 minutes, or even after like 3 to 5 minutes, you can just go ahead and reload the page and it should be done, if anything. But in the meantime, let's just go ahead and connect to it. So, or finish the connecting. So we can just click on this connect and it'll bring up this modal here. So it's asking for mine. So I can just, I already made mine. So I can just say 11 and then, yeah, I have a lot. So after this, you can just choose a connection and perfect. So after you're done with that part, what you can do is it'll take you to this page connecting to the cluster, and you can just click on drivers since this is what we're going to use to connect to Node.js. If it doesn't take you to this, I believe the option is going to be connect to your application, and then if you click on connect to application, it should take you to this page here. So you can just go ahead and click on Node.js, and then you can just copy this connection string here. So once you have copied it, it's going to say replace password with the password for Alan user, which is my username here. And so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go back into our Visual Studio Code, and then under connect to MongoDB, we're just going to take the string and then put it into a variable. That way it's easier to use. So we're going to say const db URI equals, and you can just copy and paste the connection string just like that. And now these fields are going to be very important. So if you see the username here, it should already be pre-filled. Just in the event if it isn't, you can go ahead and type that in. And then at the password here, the password that you just created, you can just type it in there. And then lastly, this is going to be the tricky part, but right before this question mark here, you can just type in the name of the database. But since we haven't done that just yet, that's what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do is you can just go ahead and close the modal here and check to see if this is reloaded here. Perfect. So it's been successfully loaded or created. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go to browse collections, and then after browse collections, you'll see two options of load a sample dataset or add my own data, and you can go ahead and click add my own database or data, sorry. So once you click it, it'll take you here and you can just type in your database name. So this database is what we're going to input over here before the question mark. So we're going to call this users DB. And then the collection name, you can call it whatever, but we'll just call it user for now. And then you can just click create. So let's just go ahead and make that here, users DB. And remember, it's going to be right before the question mark. And if you don't have the question mark, it's not going to be able to work just because it doesn't know where to pull or where to post any data into. So right here, as you can see, we have our database and our collection name. And this is basically where you're going to see your values or your API basically. So perfect. So now that we have our connection string, the last few things that we're going to do here is we are just going to use Mongoose to connect. So the way we go about doing so is we're going to type in mongoose.connect, just like that with parentheses. And then what I like to do, it's just a me thing, is I just like to have the connect on a different line there. And then inside of the parentheses, you're going to type in db URI and then comma. And then you're going to open the curly brackets there. And inside, you're going to type in two things that basically are going to help connect to our MongoDB efficiently, basically. It's going to help out the connection. So those two things are use new URL parser, and then we're going to say it's true, and then comma, just like that. And then the next one is going to be use unified topology, and then the same thing, true, just like that. Then we're going to make a promise, which is .then. And now we're going to take our app that we created. I don't know why I have it deleted, but it was like this. So we're going to combine our app.listen, and then we're going to pretty much bring it into our mongoose.connect. So if you're on a Mac, you can either copy and paste it, even on Windows, copy and paste it, or you can just highlight it and then hit Option and leave it pressed, and you can just hit the up arrow, and then you can just take the whole thing and move it up. Then what we're going to do is just finish off here and with the function here. And then now, if everything is going good, we want it to console log that we're connected. So we'll say server is connected to port 3001 and connected to MongoDB. So as you can see, everything is going good so far, and it says server is connected to port 3001 and connected to MongoDB. Now with everything, if there is any error, so you want to make sure you catch the error, right? And then you want to give it a message. So we want to console.log that message and just say unable to connect to server and or MongoDB, just like that. And if there are any errors, it'll tell you unable to connect to server and or MongoDB and the error or the problem. Perfect. And that's pretty much it. So you can just double check if you're connected to your MongoDB by simply just going back to database. And then if you look here where it says in and out, you'll see that there are numbers here, which means that it's connected. And you can also see connections here. I have 9 connections there. And for some reason, if you accidentally just kind of like hover over it and it stops, don't get too alarmed. That happens at times. It stays there for whatever reason. You can just go ahead and refresh the page, and then it should be changed once again here. So now that we have connected to our MongoDB, let's just finish off with the middleware that we are going to use once again here, which is going to be cores and body parser. So let's go ahead and just include them. So we're going to say using the Express app to use body parser .json, and then call it with the parentheses, just like that. And then the same goes for cores. So we're going to say we're going to use the Express app to use the cores middleware, and then we're going to use the Express app to use the body parser middleware. Okay, now we can go ahead and create our schema. So creating a schema, like I mentioned, we're going to make it in a different folder, and we can go ahead and just click on export here since I have already minimized it. And then in your backend, in your whole backend folder, you're just going to create a folder there, and then you're going to call it models. Then inside of the models folder, you're going to create a new file, and then this you're going to call it users schema, or user schema. Let's call it that, just like that, user schema. Perfect. Now once we have our user schema file opened, the next thing we're going to do is just create the schema here. So what we can go ahead and do, and remember, if you want to use something in a file, you have to define it, right? So we're going to do the same thing that we did here for Mongoose, since we're going to be using Mongoose to create the schema. So now we're going to do const mongoose equals require, and then mongoose, just like that. Now I don't know why I put a subtracting sign. It's supposed to be that. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we are going to start our schema. So we're going to name a variable const user called user schema, and then we're going to equal it to a new mongoose dot schema. So now remember, our schema is where our values are going to go. So every time, let's say if like you want to make a post, or you're registering, or the user is registering, you're creating a new schema with new values in it. That's going to be added pretty much into our database or API. So what we're going to say is we want 3 values, because we want our users, when they're registering, to give us their email, their username, and a password. So we can say email, colon, and then in curly brackets, you want the type to be a string, and then you want it to be required, of course, just like that. And that's it. And then the next thing we can go, don't forget the comma as well. And the next time you can say username, and similar to the top, you'll say type string, because you want the data that they're inputting it to be a string. And then you can ask for it to be required as well, which is true. And then if you want, you can make it unique. Perfect. So now we're just going to the last value here, which is password. And then same as above, you want the data there to be a string, because it is a string. And then you also want the data to be required to true. So now that we have that, what we're going to do is pretty much you're going to take all of this schema and you're going to put it pretty much inside of a variable. So you're going to take all of this and put it into a basket. So if you want to think about it, taking all of these eggs or all of these groceries and you're putting it into one big basket. That way you can use the one big basket later on, right? So we can say const user. So we're calling that big basket user, and we're equaling it to mongoose.model, and then parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we're going to say user schema, just like that. So the mongoose.model user schema is taking this whole thing. Remember this whole schema here that we're adding to our pretty much API or database, and then we're putting it into this user basket, if that makes sense. And then now going forward, when we're making our CRUD requests, you'll see that we are going to be using this instead of using this whole thing. Okay. So now the last thing that we are going to add is, in order to use this file anywhere else, or the data in this file anywhere else or in any other file, you just have to type in module.exports equals user, and just like that. So once again, in order to use the mongoose dependency, you have to define it, as with everything, right? So we're saying const mongoose equals require mongoose, just as we did here, in order to use it. Now we are saying we're defining a variable called user schema, and we're putting our new mongoose schema, or our new schema that's going to include the user's email, their username, and their password. And along with that data, we want the data to be a string. So the same thing could be, let's say if you want their age as well, you can say age, and then you can say that the type would be a number. Or if you wanted a birth date, right? I know I misspelled it. Birth date, you can say the type, and you can say date, just like that, because it's a date. So pretty much good to go with this. And then for this one, we want it to be required. That way, if the user submits the form without any of these, then they won't be able to continue. And then just for the username, we want it to be unique as well. So after that, we're going to take all of our schema, and then we're pretty much going to be putting it into a basket here called user. And now next time when we want to make a new schema, we're going to just use the name user, or the variable user, which basically means this whole thing, our new mongoose schema. Okay, so we're equaling that to mongoose.model, and in parentheses we're saying user and then user schema. And lastly, in order to use our data in this file in our user schema anywhere else, just as we're going to do in our server, we just have to make sure we include module.exports equals user. So this is basically saying, hey, if you want to use the information that I have here, just make sure that you include this. Perfect. Now lastly, with our schema, we want to make sure that we can use it, right? So if we go to server, remember how I mentioned if you want to use something, you have to pretty much like import it. The same thing goes for our user schema and being able to use the data that's inside. So we're going to say const user, because remember we're taking this whole user, which is this here. So we're saying equals require, and then you can say /models, which is the folder here, and then you want to go inside of the folder, and then you could just add /user schema, just like that. And you're pretty much done with the user schema, guys, which is awesome. Now you can just take the schema here off the list that's commented. You could just take it off the list because we're already done. And now the next thing is going to be our routes. So now that we are up to creating our routes, basically it's this way. They are CRUD requests. And by CRUD, I see, and let me just make this on another line because I know it's going to be giving me snippets of different. So, okay. So CRUD requests stand for create request, read request, update request, and a delete request. So for this video, we are pretty much going to be using a create and read. And creating, we are going to be creating our users. And then just for our APIs, we want to be able to read our APIs. So we're going to be making read requests. we're not going to be using update or delete requests in this video. So we can just go ahead and just take that out, but just wanted to show what the CRUD request meant. So when we say create request, it's going to be a post request. And then a read request is called a get request. And then an update request is called a put or patch request. And lastly, cool. Now that we have that, what we're going to be focused on is starting our registration. So the first thing, let's just comment this out here, and then we can just go ahead and continue. Let's just make another comment that way we stay organized. And we'll say this one is going to be for registration or register, user registration, and then underneath it, we can write post register because we are going to make a post request for our registration. So first things first, what we're going to say is we're going to say app.post in the parentheses, and then inside of the parentheses is where we are going to add our path. So we're going to say /register, and then another parentheses, you're going to type in rec for request and then res for response, and then just finish off the function there. And it should have something like this. So what this means is basically we're using the Express app, and remember the word app is coming from what we defined earlier for the Express app. So we're using the Express app to post data into the path or /path here. So if you remember, if you go to Google Chrome or your browser and then you go to error, now we are going to be pulling things from register from here, just like that. So if we go back, so once again, it's going to be, we're using the Express app to make a post request, and the post that we make, we're going to be posting into the /register path. And in order to get those informations or get that information, we have to request it. And then once we have that information or data, we're going to respond with that data into JSON format. That way we can show it in JSON format. So now we are going to make a try and catch block as well. So we can just add it here, async, and then we can make try. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say const, and then we're going to input those values that we want from the user, or what we want the user to input. So we're going to say we want their email, we want their username, and we want their password. And then we're going to equal that to rec.body. Rec.body is the requested information, but we want the requested information that's in the body. So basically, if we go back to Google Chrome, this is going to be the body. This is going to be the parameter or the params. So this is going to be the body. So we want the information that's posted into here. So once we have that, now what we're going to do is we are going to hash the password. So we're going to say const hashed password equals await. Now this is where we're going to use Bcrypt to hash the password. Let me just fix this here. Hashed password, await, and then Bcrypt. And you're just attaching Bcrypt to the password basically. So you're going to say hash and then password, comma 10, just like that. So you're making a variable and you're putting all of this into the variable. So you're creating the hashed password. So the password that the user creates, you're making a hash using Bcrypt. And basically what the 10 is just the how hard it is for someone to try to unhash the password. Right now, I think it's the most is probably around 10, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's around there. But for now, as a default, we can stick with 10. So lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to put everything into another variable. So we're going to say const new user equals new and then user. And remember, this means we're creating a new post or a new schema, and we're getting this user here, from our big basket that we put all of our values into, or our whole schema into, just like that. So after this, what we're going to do is you have parentheses here, and then inside parentheses, you're going to have curly brackets, and then you're going to include the values that you want as well. So you're going to say email, username, then not just password now, but since it's hashed, you're going to say password, colon, and then hashed password, because now the password is hashed. Then lastly, you're going to await and then new user and then you're just going to save it using the .save method. So basically, you're creating a new schema that includes the user's email, username, and hashed password now. And then once that's created, you're saving it using the save method here. Now you can just go ahead and make a status and pretty much render it in JSON format, respond in JSON format. So you can say res.status because we're creating a status code for it. And then we're going to say, give us a status code of 201 if everything is working perfectly in JSON format. And if everything's working perfectly, we want a message to show up that says user created successfully, just like that. And now with everything, we want to make sure that there are no errors. So we want to be able to catch any errors. So you're just going to pass in the error. And then if there are any errors, you want to make a status code. So you're responding with a status code of 500 in JSON format. And then in JSON format, you want a message or an error, you can say. And the error you want is error signing up. Perfect. So here you have your post user registration. So once again, you're using the app, the Express app, to post or to be able to make a post request into the /register path. In order to do that, you have to request the information, and then once you have the information, you can respond in JSON format or in anything that you like to do, but in this case, we are responding in JSON format. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we are going to have to define the email, username, and password, which we are getting from the body. And once again, the request body is going to be in Google Chrome here. Everything is going to be here. Next, we're going to deal with the password. We want to be able to secure the password, so we're going to be hashing the password. And in a little bit, you'll be able to see how the hash password is going to look. It's going to be a whole bunch of letters and numbers combined. And it's going to be long too, so it's going to be pretty interesting. So you're going to define that variable. So you're going to put everything into the hash password. So you're going to say you're going to use Bcrypt to hash and then the password. And then you want the difficulty to unhash it to be a 10. You can think of it that way. Now, we're creating the last variable here that we're going to call new user with every post that the user makes. And with that post, we're making a new user or a new schema. And remember, we're getting this user from this user schema here because we're taking all of our eggs and we're putting it into one basket here. And what we want included is an email, a username, and not only just the password, but now since we have just hashed it, we want a hashed password. So now once we have everything, we want to be able to use to save it. Now in order to save it, we're going to say new user dot save, use a save method in parentheses. Now if everything goes well and the user is created successfully, we want to find out in a message, and that message we want it to be responded in a status code of 201 in JSON format. And then if there are any errors, we want to be able to catch it and then pass through the error as a status code of 500 in JSON format. And if there are any errors, we wanted to say error signing up. So let's go ahead and test it out. What you can do is you can download this software. It's called Postman, and it's a pretty good software as well. It helps test endpoints and APIs. And for this, I recommend, if you're going to be using it locally, I recommend you downloading the software directly to your machine or to your computer or to your laptop, rather than using Postman's online web software. Just because if you're using it locally, it won't be able to pick up the local server. You're going to have errors and you're just going to drive yourself crazy, just like I did. So it's best if you just download the software to your local machine and use that one instead. So now once you have created your account, what you can do is you can come to this plus sign here. And as you can see, you'll have your requests on the left here, get, post, put, patch, and delete. And then you can go ahead and enter the path or the URL. So since I have it here, it's going to be the same thing, but I'll just choose this here. And it's going to be http://localhost:3001, your port /register. And that's what we have here. If we go back to our Visual Studio Code, we'll see that we have it /register. Now, in order to post something into it, we can just go ahead and change the get to a post request. And then we come to the body here. And then from these options, you can just choose raw. And then from after raw, you can go to this text in blue in the drop down. Just click on the drop down and you can choose JSON. Definitely remember to change the text to JSON, because if you don't, then you'll just drive yourself crazy as well from everything not working. So in order to make it work or to test it out, or what we're going to do is we're just going to input and test it out. So we're going to say curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets is where we're going to name our values. So the first thing we want is an email from our user. So we're gonna pretty much make believe as if we're signing up. So we're just gonna say email in quotes, and then out of the quotes we're gonna have a colon, and then in the quotes we're gonna have an email, any email that you can make up. So we're gonna say test@test.com, comma, don't forget the comma. And now we can ask for the username, and then the username we can just make it something simple, which is test. And now for the password, I recommend using an easy password because it's going to be hashed, and if you don't remember it, then you won't be able to pretty much log in afterwards. So just use like a very simple password. So for this password, we'll just use password, right? So now once we click send, if everything goes right, we should be able to get this message, user created successfully. And if not, then we'll get this error signing up message. So let's give it a try, fingers crossed, and send. And perfect. Look at that, guys. So now we have user created successfully. So since we haven't made a GET request, we can't get the request just yet from Postman. But what we can do is we can go to Google Chrome and then our database. So if we go to browse collections, and then I don't know why there's two users. Oh, it's because I made it with an S. You can just go ahead and delete this one here, user, since we're going to go off the users. And if you click on it, you'll see that our email test@test.com, test, and then the password. But look at this, the password now is hashed. As you can see, it has a whole bunch of characters, numbers, and letters as well. That's pretty cool, right? Perfect. So now as you can see that it worked. Now we have our post request working. So now the next thing that we're going to focus on is getting our users registered. So now that we have our post users registered, we're going to try to get that information using a GET request. So it's going to be similar to our post, but a little different. So let's just make a comment. That way we keep things organized. And let's say this is a GET request registered users. And I can't spell always. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are just going to say let's use the Express app to get data that's in the /register path. And now we just want to make there we go, we just want to make an async as well. And then in order to do that, we want to request it, and then request the information, and then once we have the information, we want to respond with the information in JSON format. So sorry, added like an extra space there and it's just throwing me off. There we go. So once we have this, we're going to make a try block as well. And now we're going to say const user equals await user dot find, and it's going to be a method. So basically what we're saying is we are taking our user, and we want to find what's in our user schema or our database here. So that's where we're putting it into our users, so it can be more easily used later on as well. Now what we're going to do is we are underneath it going to type in res.status, because again we want to respond with a status code of 201 this time here, and we want it to be in JSON format. And then instead of rendering in JSON format in a message, we just want it to render the user, or users, plural, since that's what we have here. So we're using here to render it here in JSON format. Now, as always, if there are any errors, we want to make sure that we catch it, so we are passing in an error. And then if there are any errors, we want to get a status code of 500, and we want it to render in or show in JSON format. with an error message that says unable to get users, just like that. And let me just stay with this consistent because I noticed that I made double quotes there. Single quote. Let me just type it in as well. Unable to get users. Awesome. And just like that, guys. So now, once again, what we have here is we're using the Express app. Remember the app here we're getting from the variable app that we have defined for our Express app. And instead of posting, we are making a GET request. So we're using the Express app to get the data that's in the / registration path. And in order to do so, we have to request the information. And once we have the information, the data, we're going to do something with the data, in which we are going to respond in JSON format. So we're going to define users, and we're going to take the user. Remember the whole schema here, we put all of our eggs in the user basket, and then we are attaching it to a .find method because we want to find everything that's inside of that schema. So once we have the users defined, we want to render if everything is good with a status code with a 201 status code in JSON format, and we just want it to show our users, all of our users. If you wanted it to show a message, you can definitely do that as well. But in this case, since we just want to get the information, we're just going to pass on the users. And as always, if there are any errors, we want to make sure we catch it, pass in the error, and then respond with a status code of 500 in JSON format with an error message that says unable to get users. Perfect. So let's go to our handy dandy Postman. And now we can just leave everything just as it is, except the post. We can just hit this drop down, and then we can go to get, since we will be making a GET request. And this you can leave it as well. So now when we hit send, if everything's good, we should be able to get this message here, or our users. If not, then we'll get this message of unable to get users. So let's check it out. Let's hit send, and look at that, guys. So we have successfully got our users. As you can see, we have an ID which automatically is given. We have the user email, the username, and the hashed password now as well. It's pretty awesome, right, guys? So far we got through 2 requests. We got through post request, and we got through a GET request. Now let's just put it to the test once again here, and let's just make another user. So we'll say user at user.com. We can call this username user, and then the password, we could keep a password. So now we changed it to a post request, and let's take a look. User successfully created. And now let's make a GET request. And now look at that, guys. We have both now, the test and the user. And look at the password as well. It's also hashed, which is pretty awesome. And now if we go to our Google Chrome and we go to our register, if we refresh it, we will see our API basically, which is in an array. That's pretty awesome. So now that we got through the post request for our registered users and a GET request for our users as well, the next thing that we are going to be working on is a post request, but for logging in our users. So let's continue with our post request, which is going to be for our login. So let's just organize everything, and let's type in get login. Oh, we could just leave it like that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to basically do the same thing here as we did here as well, but it's going to be a post request. So we're going to type in app.post, and then instead of /register, we're going to say /login, because we're going to be logging in. So now, as normal, we're going to request the information, and once we have the information, we are going to respond with the information to do something. Now we are going to also make this an async, and then create our try and catch block. Now we are going to define as we did over here. So we are going to define those values that we want. So when the user is logging in, the only thing that we want them to add or to fill out is their username and their password. That way they can log in. We don't really necessarily need their email. So we'll just say const username, password, and then equals rec.body. And then remember, the rec.body is the request. So requesting the information that's in the body. right here, rect.body. Now we're going to define another variable and call it user. So const user equals await user dot find one. And inside of the parentheses, we are going to be passing in username. So basically what this is saying is we are going to be inside of the user schema. We're going to be finding just one thing, right? And that one thing that we want to find is the username. And we just want to make sure that the username is created. If not user, we can just return a response in the status of 401 code in JSON format. You got that right. And we want the error to say invalid credentials, just like that. Now we are going to do the password. Now we're going to say const is password valid, because we want to make sure that the password is valid. We make an await. Now we reintroduce the bcrypt again. So we say bcrypt.compare password with the user password. So what this is saying is that we're using bcrypt to compare the password that we have saved in our database for the user. We're comparing it with the password that the user entered. Okay, just like that. And then the same thing, we make an if statement. If not is password valid, or is password not valid. If password is not valid, we just return a code just like this. And then we want the code to be 401 as well in JSON format. And then the error message that says also invalid invalid. Awesome. Now lastly is where we are going to focus on our token. Remember how I mentioned the token that we're using a JSON Web Token? So now we're going to do the same thing. So underneath the if statement, we're going to type in const token equals JWT. Remember JSON Web Token for here, JWT, and then parentheses, and then inside of the curly brackets that we're also making, we're looking up the user ID, which is going to be the user dot ID underscore ID. And then when it comes to a token, we have to have a secret key. So we're just going to name this secret key just like that, secret and then underscore key. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to define it, and we can just define it up here. We're going to say const secret key equals, you can make it anything you like. So you can say, we could just keep it normal, secret key, like that. So we have our secret key. And lastly, we want the session to expire, right? So we want it to expire in, let's say, an hour. So we're going to add an hour. And lastly, we are just going to render it in JSON format with a message, of course, that says, that message that says login successful. Just like that. It's not successfully successful. Perfect. And as normal, we want to catch any errors, and we want to catch the error. And if there is an error, we want it to be in a code, a status code of 500 in JSON format. And we want there to be an error message that says error logging in. Perfect. So we're using the Express app to post data inside of this path /login. And in order to do so, we have to request the information and then respond with the data to do something with the information. And the data that we are going to be posting is the username and password that's in the request body. And then we're going to make a variable and call it user. And then we're going to use the schema, remember user, which is the whole schema inside of the user basket. And then we're going to be attaching it to a method called find one. So we're just going to be finding one thing to match it with. So that matching is going to be username. So if not user, you want to return a status code of 401 in JSON format, and you want the error to say invalid credentials, or the error message to say invalid credentials. Now we focused on the user or the username. Now let's focus on the password. Now we are creating a password, a variable that says is password invalid or valid. Then we're attaching it to a bcrypt, and we're comparing the password that's already in the data to the user password that the user just input in order to log in. So if it's not the password, then we want the error to have a status code of 401 and render it in JSON format and give us an error message that says invalid credentials. Now lastly, when we sign in, we want a token to be created, and that token is going to follow us around because it's a session. So we are creating a token and we are attaching that to the method of sign. And inside we're using the user ID, because remember, if you go to Postman, you'll get the user ID that's automatically created and the user ID here for every post. And then you're using your secret key. And definitely remember this, when doing a user authentication for a login and using JSON Web Token, it has to have a secret key. So we're just making a secret key to whatever you like. In this case, we're just calling it secret key. And if you're ever deploying a project that has a secret key, definitely make sure that it's in your env file and not here. But since we're just doing it for tutorial purposes, we'll just leave it here. And then you want the session to expire in an hour. So if everything goes well and the user successfully logs in, you want them to receive a message that says login successful. And if there are any errors, you want to make sure that you catch the errors or the error. You want to give it a status code of 500, render in JSON format, and you want the error message to say error logging in. So perfect. Now let's test it out and see how it goes. So let's bring up our handy dandy Postman and let's try it out. So with the get here, we can leave everything as is except for this register. So register, we can just type in login. Now, since we're at login, we're just going to be asking the user for the username and password. You can take away the email. So let's just go do that. And you can leave everything else. So now let's test it out. Fingers crossed, and we are getting an error. So let's see what that error can be. Let's just look over our code because everything should be working, but let's just make sure. So we have app.post/login, recres, okay, try, you're putting in the username and password, equaling it to the body, using the user, await, user defined one method, and you want the username. If not user, return the status code of invalid credentials. Const is password valid, await, Bcrypt compare. You're comparing the passwords to the password to the user.password. Still looks good. If not is password valid, you're returning a status code 401 in JSON format. You have your token that you're defining, .sign method, user ID, and then user ID _ ID. You have your secret key, and then you have your section expiring in 1 hour. So res.json message login successful. So everything looks good. Let's see why it's not working. Let's see if it can give us an error, the reason why. So error logging in. Let's see if it gives an error like this. The password, it should be right. Let's just do this just to make sure, because at times Postman can have some issues. So you can just get out of everything and then go back in. So we're going to say local, and it should be saved if anything. So we go to login, change it to a post. I think because I didn't change it to a post, that's why. So if we go to body and then raw text, change it to JSON, and let's just do the normal here. We're going to have the username, which is let's say test, and then password, we're going to call this password, which was, now hopefully it does work. And perfect, guys. Yeah, so it looks like I didn't have the get request there. If I did, then that's because at times Postman does give issues that I've noticed. And if you guys end up getting that, just feel free to like exit this out or close this and then open up a new one. Perfect. So now let's try the user. So let's try user, and since the password was the same, hit send, and now look at that, guys. Perfect. So we have the login successful. Perfect. So now, guys, you have done a post request for your registration, a get request for your registered users, and now a post request for your user logging in. Perfect. So now that we have all of the requests that we needed, the next thing that we're going to do is just minimize this backend. That way we can focus on the front end. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come to the terminal, and then you're going to hit this button next to the trash can, which is splitting the terminal. So if you click it, it should be split there. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you CD out of the backend and then CD into the front end. And in order to do that, all you have to do is just type in CD or change directory and then space dot dot, just like that. And then as you can see, we were CD'd out of the backend folder back into our root folder, our big folder where the project is. Now we want to CD inside of into the front end folder. So we're going to type in CD front end, just like that. And now, as you can see, we are CD'd into our front end. Perfect. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create our React app. So in order to do so, what we're going to do is we're going to type in the terminal npx create React app, not equals create React app, then space the name of your React app. And this one, we're just going to call it users auth. Then you can just hit enter. And you should see all this happening, the installation of the packages. It'll take a few minutes. So if you like, you can just give yourself a break. But yeah, it does take about 1 to 3 minutes. Normally about 2 minutes, give or take. So we'll just wait it out here. So it looks like our React app has been done installing. So now this is very important that you do. What we're going to do now is CD into the user's auth or CD into your React app. So whatever you called your React app, you're going to CD into that. So as you can see here, we're going to say CD users auth and then hit enter. Now you should see the front end change into the users auth or the name of your folder. So definitely please double and triple check that as well, because let's say if you're installing any libraries or please double or triple check that as well, because let's say if you're installing any libraries or even Tailwind for that matter, if you install it outside of your React app, it's not going to work, and then you're just going to be going crazy and wondering why Tailwind isn't working. So just make sure that it is inside of the React app here. Perfect. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to install a few things. So we're going to install 3 things basically. The first 2, we're going to install Axios, and which is going to help us connect to our API or our database. And the second one is going to be React Router DOM, in which is just going to help us navigate through our pages. So we're going to type in npm I or npm install Axios and React Router DOM, just like that. And this now usually takes a second here. Perfect. So now that we have those out of the way, we are going to install Tailwind. And you can just go back into Google Chrome and then open a new page, but I already have it open here. You can go to tailwindcss.com, either to the docs or get started, and then it'll take you to the documentation page here. And normally it's the first 3 steps. So let's just go ahead and do this as well. Just copy. And then as you can see, if you go to your front end, React has a whole bunch of these extra files that we're going to delete as well. So if you just go to your command line and copy this here and paste it into your command line to install Tailwind, it should take a second. And as you can see, it was successfully installed. So just open the tailwind.config file there, and then you're going to just copy what's in the brackets of the content here. Okay, so you're adding the paths to all of your template files in your tailwind.config file. So you're going to do the same thing, and you're just going to paste it inside of the content bracket here. And that's pretty much it for step 2. And now lastly, for step 3, you're adding the Tailwind directives for each of Tailwind's layers to your main CSS file. So the same thing, you can just copy. And then what I like to do is I like to first just delete all of the files that I'm not going to need. So I'll delete setup tests, report web vitals, logo.svg, and app.tests. And then what I like to do is just open all of them up here. And the last one that I open up is going to be the app.css. And this is where we are going to paste our layers there. So you can just Command All or Control All on the Mac and on Windows, and then just paste it there. You can just get out of it, and you can get out of the schema as well. So now we'll have our app.js file. You can go from the header to the header, and then you can just delete it. And then at the top where the import of the logo is, you can just delete that as well. And you can leave the app.js because we're going to be using it for the browser router. And then we can go to our index.css file, command all of it or control all of it, and just delete it. And then now you can just close that out. And then lastly, we'll have our index.js file. This one you can just delete the comments there. And lastly, delete the import of the web vitals. Just like that. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we are going to import our browser router. So the first thing that we're going to do is, as I just mentioned, import it. So we're going to say import, and then in brackets, browser router from React router DOM, just like that. And then where it says React strict mode, you can just highlight all of it and you can just type in browser router. And perfect. You're pretty much done with the index.js file, and you can just close that here. Now in your app.js file, this is where we are going to import our route and our routes as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say import curly brackets routes route from React outer DOM. Sometimes it has the autofill feature, but now it doesn't seem to be working, which sucks, but doing it manually definitely helps out as well. So the way that this is going to work is we want our app to be inside of our router. So we're going to say routes, just like that. So now that we have our routes, we are going to come into our source folder here in our front end folder. And then we are going to create two folders. One is going to be our components, where we are going to have our navbar. And then the next one is going to be our pages. And these are the different types of pages that we are going to have that we will be showcasing on our navbar as well. And these pages include your home page, they include your sign up, your login, and your account page for when the user signs in successfully. So let's go ahead and just create them. So you're going to create inside of the components just the navbar.js, and then in the pages you're going to create the 4 pages. So you're going to have your home.js, you're going to have your login.js, you're also going to have your signup.js, and lastly you are going to have your account.js. So once you create them, they should all be created, they should all be opened up just like this. And then if you don't have it, you can download this extension. It's called ES7 plus React, Redux, and React Native snippets, which is just going to help write out those functions instead of having it to do manually. That way we can render the pages there and import them. So you could go to the navbar first, and you can just type in RFCE, and then it should be the first one, and you're good to go with the navbar. Just bring this back. You could do the same thing for the rest of the pages as well. Oops. CE, and lastly for the account page. Awesome. Perfect. So now we have all of our pages and components pretty much imported. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back into the app.js file here. And inside, the way we're going to render it is we're going to be saying route self-enclosing tag. So our routes are going to be, it's going to have an open and closing tags, but our route is going to be a self-closing tag. So next to the route there, you're going to type in path, and this is the path that you want it to be. So normally a home page is referenced to a /. So we can leave it that way. And then next to it, you can type in element and then equals curly brackets. And then this is where you are going to render your home page, just like that. Perfect. So now we're going to do this. We're just going to copy and paste it about 3 more times for our other pages. So 1, 2, 3. And then the next one is going to be our login path. And then we want it to render our login page. And when the user goes into our sign up path, we want it to render our sign up page. And lastly, when a user goes into our account page, a path, we want it to render the account page. And now let's just add the navbar. That way they can show in all of the pages. And lastly, for the app.js file, what we're going to do is just import them. So just like this, import navbar from quotes dot forward slash components forward slash navbar, and then import home from quotes dot forward slash pages this time because it's under the pages folder, and then home. Now what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to copy this 3 more times, 1, 2, 3 for the other pages, and then on a Mac, what you can do this simultaneously, which is pretty cool. So you can just click where you want to write, and then hit Option and leave it pressed, and click on the other side of the E. So you can just delete that and write it both at the same time. So this one's going to be login, and please write it the same way that you made it over here. So if it's with a capital L, capital H, capital A, capital S, that's the same way that you're writing it up here. So the next thing is going to be sign up. So we are going to write sign up. Oh, what am I doing? Sign, let me just redo this again. Sign up. What am I doing wrong? Sorry guys. Sign up, there we go. And lastly is going to be our account page. So we're gonna do the same for the account and capital A account. Perfect, just like that. And we just finished using the browser router via React Router DOM. So now that we have our browser router and our routes and our route pretty much set up, we are going to focus on our navbar. So if you come to the navbar, we can just erase this nav and then just enter it, and then change the div and make it into a nav or navbar. Now, what we're going to do here is we are going to make it an H1. So our goal for the homepage is going to be our logo. So, well, first thing is we're going to say link, and then H1 is going to be inside of the link, and then the link we're going to call it AuthDB, or the logo. Sorry, the logo we're going to call it AuthDB. And let me just put this to the side. That way I can start the server. So if you want to start the server, you can say npm start, and then that should start the React server, as you can see here. Take a little while. Perfect. And we're already starting with an error, but not to worry, we can get that error fixed there. And that's basically because we're not defining the link, in which we'll do as well here. So in order to define it, you can say import curly brackets link from React Router DOM, and then it should go away, as you can see here. So with the link, it's the same thing as like an anchor tag, but except we're using React Router DOM. So we can just say to, and then just erase the curly brackets and change it to single or double quotes, and then you can just put a / because this is what our homepage is going to be. As you can see, it's going to be down here. If you can see the mouse here, once we hover over it, it'll take us directly to our homepage. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we are going to go to our UL unordered list, and we're going to do the same thing as we did up here. So we're going to say link, and then li this time, and the first one is going to be login, and then we can just go ahead and copy and paste that to the bottom, and then switch the login to a sign up. So for the link here, we can say to / login, because that's the path for the login page. And then for the one underneath it, for the sign up, it's going to be similar, except we're going to say / sign up. Awesome. So as you can see, even if we click it, we'll be taken to their respective pages. Let's click on login, sign up, back to the home page. And even if we hover over it, as you can see down here, it'll take us to the respective path, which is pretty awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to add some CSS via Tailwind, and we're just going to add a class name because it is React, and we're going to flex this, that way it can just come up here, and then justify, we can say around, that way it can just add some space. Perfect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add some padding to bring this a little bit down, so padding 3, and then we want to add a border, although it's not going to matter really much, but we'll just add the border bottom here. And we want the color to be our new favorite color, which is Zinc 800 here. And then after that, you want this, since we're going to make the logo a little bigger, you want this to be aligned with the middle of the logo. So we can say items center, and then we want the background to be kind of like a black or like a light black that we're going to add opacity to. So we're going to say BG for background, brackets, and then the pound sign. We're going to say just like that. Then /90 to add some opacity. And lastly, we're just going to add some text color from this black, and we're going to make it to zinc again. But this time we're going to say zinc 300. And look at that, guys. It looks nice. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to focus on the unordered list, which we're adding the class name again. And then we're going to say flex to bring this up here. And then we're going to add a gap of, I'll say 6. That way we can add some space between. Awesome. So that's looking good there. And then lastly, what we can do is for this header here, we're just going to add a class name, and then we're just going to say text 3XL. That way it can just grow. And look at that, guys. And this is going to be straight in the middle here. So now, as you can see, it's going to be the home page. You go to login page, sign up, and sign up page. And there you have it. You have your navbar that's completed. And it was pretty quick too. That's why I definitely love using Tailwind CSS. Now that we have finished our navbar component, what we can turn our heads to is our signup page. So you can go ahead and click on the signup page here, or the signup file, signup.js file, and we can get started. So let's make the layout here first, so you can just delete that. So we have a div, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make 2 child divs inside of this parent div here, just like that. So inside of the first child div is going to be our form. So let's type in form. And then inside of this div here is where we're just going to have h2 that says sign up. Now let's just go ahead and add some styling to it. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go to our parent div, and then we're going to call it class name. And then we want it to be a full length width, and then an H screen, or the height to be the screen. And then what we're going to want to do is make this a flex. Perfect. So now in the first child div, what we can do as well is we are going to make the width 50% of the parent, which is going to be 50%. And then the height, we can keep it at 100% as well. Now we can add the background to be, let's say, that grainy blackish like we have in our navbar here. So it's going to be hash and then 1A, 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 or the pound 1A. So as you can see, we're going to have on the left side our form, and then on the right side we are going to have just a sign up here that says sign up. That way the user knows that they are on the sign up page. Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to do after the background color, we're going to just add the text to be white. That way the form comes out white. And then the flex, you can say flex and then justify center, like that. And then we want the items to be centered. That way our form is going to be to the middle and then to the center here. Perfect. So now we can move on to the form. So the form, we can style it class name, and then we can say text center, and then we can make a border, and then we can have that border rounded to, let's say, large. And the border, we can give it a width of, let's say, 600 pixels with a height of 400 pixels. So we can say height 400 pixels. Not only that, we want to be able to give it some padding, some breathing room. So let's add some padding here of 9. So if we want, we can just do this here. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do after dealing with the class name, or the class for the form, the styling, is we are going to just make a comment right under just to keep things organized. And this is where we are going to make our email label and email input. So we're going to say email input, and then right below it we are just going to type in our label, and then this one is going to be called email. And then you can add a break. I don't normally use breaks, but just for this purpose we can use a break here. And then right underneath it you can make your input just like that. So we can style up this input and make the class name here, type the class name, and then we want the input to be, let's say, about 400 pixels width, and then the height we can say, let's say, about 40 pixels. 4 pixels. I said 40 pixels. There we go. Awesome. Now we want to round the borders a little bit as well. So we can just say rounded XL, and then let's make the background color my new favorite color as well, which is Zinc 700. And then lastly, let's add some padding to it. That way, as you can see, if we type in, it's not going to be too close to the border there. So if we add a padding and we can say P2, it should give us a good enough padding there. Perfect. Just like that. So now that we're done with the background and the padding for our input, the next thing that we can do is move on to our username input. So we can just add more breaks to it, about 2 should be sufficient. And then we can make a comment and type in username input. And then we can basically do the same thing here. So we can just go ahead and copy and paste it, and then just change the email to username. And this is going to stay the same as well. So we're good to go there. And then now you can do the same thing. You can just, we already copied it, but you can paste it again here for the password. So you can just change this to the password, and then you're pretty much done with it. And now we can just go underneath it, and this is where we are going to create our button. And now for the button, how we're going to create it is just a simple button like this, and it's going to have height and width, but not exactly. So we're just going to say depth 200 pixels, and then with a height of, I think 50 pixels should do it. And then of course we want to add a border to it. And then on hover, my other favorite color is now is teal, so we can say teal 900. And then in the middle we can say submit, or sign up. Sorry, sign up. Perfect. So now look at, if we hover, it's going to turn green. Awesome, guys. And I know it's not mobile ready, this, so let's just move this a little to the right here. That way we're not interfering with that. Perfect. Awesome. So now it's pretty much done with the styling of the left side. So let's just finish off with the right side here. So now if we can go to the second child div, it's going to be the same thing pretty much as the top. So we can just either copy and paste it or just type it in manually. And just for practice, let's type it in. So it's also going to have a width of 50% of the parent, which was 100. And then the height is also going to be 100. Then we can go ahead and make a flex, justify center, items center, and BG, the background, we can make it, let's say another teal, but this time 800. And let's see, for the H2, we can make a class, and let's make it a little bigger here. So we can say 3XL, and then the text, we can make it white. And look at that, guys, look how it is. So let's just maximize it, and that's how it's going to look. Perfect. So now that's pretty much it with the styling. It was pretty quick, and once again, that's why I do enjoy using Tailwind. So the next thing that we're going to do is just set up our Axios as well as our useState and useEffect hooks. So what we can do is at the top here where the input is, you can just type in next to the React, you can just type in useState and useEffect. So basically what useState is going to do, it's going to allow us to store our APIs or certain values inside of it. That way we can use it on our page if we are rendering the API onto our page. But if not, we are going to be able to store our values. That way on submit, when the user clicks to sign up, it'll be stored, and then they'll go into the API. They'll make the post request inside of their respective values. So if the user types in on the email, you press sign up, it's going to go straight into the database, and it's going to say email. So now that we have our useState, our useEffect is going to help connect to our API or our database. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to import Axios from Axios. Perfect. So now that we have them imported, we are just going to continue with our useState. So we are going to define a few things, and we're going to say const user set users equals useState, and then this one's going to be brackets or the array, and then underneath it we are going to list those that we're going to be needing from the user, so which is going to be the email, username, and password. So similar to the top, we're going to do the same. We're going to say email, and then set email equals useState, and then in parentheses you're going to have the quotes. So we can continue const username set username equals use, not use effect, use state, and then inside parentheses we have the quotes. And lastly, we have const password set password now equals use state parentheses and then the quotes, just like that. So now another thing that we are going to use is going to be called a use navigate, and the use navigate is going to be from the React router DOM. So let's go and install that as well. So we're going to say import use navigate from React router DOM. So what use navigate is going to be helpful for our sign up page is when after a user successfully signs in, we want them to be routed or redirected right to the login page. That way they don't have to go and do that themselves. So now that we have all of our libraries that we're going to be using and our use states are already pretty much defined, let's continue. Now what you can do is you can just open your inspect page here, and let's just, I don't like seeing the errors there. So perfect. So now what we're going to do is we are going to use the use effect. So we're going to say use effect, finish off the function, and then you're going to say fetch users. And this is just so that we can see our APIs in the console as well. So now that we have that, let's just add the dependency, the empty list array dependency. And then right underneath it, let's define the fetch users. So we're going to say const fetch users equals, and then finish out the function just like that. And then now what we're going to say is, let's just get this error. And now what we're going to say is we're going to use Axios to get the info remember. So let's go to our handy dandy Postman and let's just take the login and let's change that to register. And then we can just go ahead and copy and paste that here inside of the get here, inside of the parentheses. Awesome. So since we are just getting the information, we don't need to do anything else except just make the promise. And then we can just console.log it. That way we can just see if it's working or not. So we'll just take a look, refresh it, and as you can see, it's working. Look at this. We are connected to our API here. And as you can see, we have the two signups that we made earlier, which is the test and the user. So awesome. Everything is working just as it needs to. So the next thing that we can do is we're going to make the handle submit form, or the handle register form. So we can go ahead and make the function, which is const handle, we're going to call it register equals parentheses, and then you can finish off the function just like that. And then inside of the parentheses, we're going to be passing on the event, and then we're going to type in event.prevent default and then parentheses. So basically what we're doing is when the user hits the sign up button, we don't want the page to refresh. So that's why we are basically just preventing it from doing that, or preventing the normal action that it's supposed to do, which is refresh the page. So now we're going to use again Axios. So we can type in Axios, and now it's not going to be a GET request, it's going to be, you guessed it, a POST request. So we can just copy and paste it once again here. And then now it's going to be different from this because this we just needed to post it. But now we're going to be asking for the values that we want. So those values are email, username, and password, just like that. And now lastly, we are going to make the promise, and you don't need to necessarily pass in anything. And now what we're going to add is set email, because this is where we want to store our set email value. We can do the same for set username, set username, as well as the set password, just like that. So the next thing that we want to do is, as soon as the user hits the sign up button, instead of refreshing it, what we want is to just automatically refresh this part here. That way we can see if it works in our console here. So let's just go ahead and refresh that. So by doing so, we can refetch it. And we can do so just by adding this use effect, or this fetch users and the call. So we can just say underneath it, fetch users and then the call. And then we can just add a few more things here. So the next thing is the use navigate. So once again, once the user signs up, we want them to be redirected automatically to the login page. So we can go ahead and define it. So we can say, and in parentheses. Now underneath the fetch users, you can just type in navigate I can't spell, navigate, okay, parentheses, and then in quotes, you can just type in the path, so which is /login. Awesome. And lastly, what we want is an alert. That way we can just notify the user that they've been successfully logged in. So we can just say alert if everything was good. Alert, registration, successful. Perfect. And lastly, with everything, we just want to make sure that we catch any errors. And if there are any errors, that way we can go ahead and fix them. And if there are any errors, we want it to console log unable to register user. Awesome, guys. Awesome. Now that we have our handle register for our form, we can go ahead and just attach it. So we can go to our form here, and then we can just type in on submit, run this function here, handle register. And now we can go individually to each input. That way we can store their respective values. So what I like is I like to just click here and do everything simultaneously and then change it later on. So we're going to say, we're just going to click there, here with option as well, and then here. And you can just hit enter. And the first thing that we are going to enter will be the type, which is type. It's going to be a text. And not to worry, I know, like, for example, for the password, the type is going to be password. We'll change that once we get to the password here. So the next one is going to be a placeholder if you want to have a placeholder. And then you can just type in email. And as you can see, the placeholder was made over here. Awesome. So the next thing that we are going to focus on is the value. So this is where we are adding the email. Oh, and I just got out of it. Okay. Sorry, guys. Email. Okay. And then the last thing is going to be our onChain, since we're having the form do something. So we're going to just, in parentheses, pass in the event and then the respective values. So we're going to say set email and then e.target.value or event.target.value, just like this. Basically what we're doing here is we want to grab whatever input that the user is filling out, and on the click of the sign up, we want the individual inputs or values to be stored in their respective values. So once the user clicks sign up in our database, it'll show email, username, password in their respective fields. Awesome. So now we can just go ahead and go to the username. So the type will be text as well. The placeholder, we can change it to username. The value, we can change it to username as well. And then the onChain, we're going to change it from set email to set username, because that's where we want to store it. And we're done with the username. And lastly, we can now go to the password. The text is going to be a password. And as you can see the difference, so we left it at text. If you type in a password, you can actually see it, but we want to change it to a password. So type in password, it's going to be like that. So now the placeholder, we can say password. Oh, sorry. Yeah, password. And then the value, we're going to say password. So you can see it's typing there. And then lastly, we're going to change this set email to set password. Now it shouldn't be giving that problems like it did now, and as you can see, it's not. Perfect, guys. So the last thing here, let me just check something really quick. Perfect. So the last thing that we have to add is the type to our button. That way, once we click the button, we know we're telling it to submit the form. So we can just type in type and then say that it entered submit, just like that. Now, if we want, we can just go ahead and test it out. So let's go ahead. And once we input the fields, we'll see that this number is going to increase. So let's just go back to this. And then what we can do is just delete the test and the user, because I don't know what other username that we can use, but let me just take this out and test. And you can do so just by easily clicking on the trash can there. Perfect. So in this collection, we don't have anything anymore. So if we go back to our React app, let's go and enter it. So we're going to say test@test.com. And then the username, we're going to say test. And then now the password, we're going to just say password. Now, once we hit submit, we should see this go into 1 or 0 because, so let's just make that again. Test@test.com, test, and then password. So fingers crossed, and look at that, guys, registration successful. So now we click OK, and as you can see, it was added. So a few things happened here. So it was refetched and it was added. So now we have it added here. The test.com test and the ID and the hashed password. Not only that, as you can see, it pretty much redirected us to our login page, which is pretty cool, right guys? So now that we have our sign up page fully functional, we can move on to our login page. Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code and we can go to the sign up page, and let's just copy. That way we don't have to do everything from scratch again. We can just copy the whole thing, and then we can go ahead and paste it inside of our login, because it's going to be the same thing, except we're going to be just asking for the username and the password. So we can just paste it, and of course you're going to have a whole bunch of errors, but not to worry, we'll have those errors fixed. So now that we are in the login, just because it's going to be the same, almost the same process, we can just copy and paste what we have here for the imports, and then we can just paste it back there. So we can just finish this off here, and perfect. So just make a few lines here. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is, like I mentioned before, it's going to be similar to the register or the handle register, in which we're going to just be asking the user for the input fields to type in their username and their password. So we can go ahead and do so. We're just going to enter the const, so it's going to be const users, and then set users, and then we can say use state, just like that, and then the brackets. So now we are going to be asking for as well the username and the password, since those are the two values that we're going to be asking the user for once again. So we're going to say username and then set username equals state, use state, and then parentheses, quotes. And same thing can happen here, and then password, set password equals use state, parentheses, and quotes there. And lastly, it's going to be the const navigate, because we're going to be using the as well. Use navigate and then parentheses. And now once the user successfully logs in, it's going to be taking them to their account page. That's going to be protected as well. So now that we have these four here, perfect. We can go ahead and just go back to the sign up, and let's just take this console.log, because we just want to make sure everything's working. And now if you like, it's going to be the same thing that we're going to be using. So you can just copy the use effect and the const fetch users, and you can just paste it inside of the login. And now you can just uncomment this. That way you just want to make sure that it works. And let's see if it's working here. No, it should give us the working. But once we finish off with this, with these errors, it should be working. So the next thing that we are going to do is we're just going to take out this email input here, because we're not going to be asking for the email. So we can just go ahead and delete that. And then this handle register, we can just take this off for now. Awesome. So now, as you can see, let's just refresh the page, and now it's working, our API here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make, just as we did with our handle register, we're going to make a handle login for our form. So we can say const handle login equals async. Now we're going to use an async and try block and catch as well. So we can say async event, finish it off, and then event dot prevent default. And now we can type in the try on the next one. Let me just make a there, and then try block. Now we can say const response equals await axios dot post, and then this is where we are entering our handy dandy URL. But in this case, instead of register, we're going to make it login. So we can just go ahead and copy that and then paste it inside of our post here, quotes, and then you can type it in or paste it in. Awesome. And now, as we did with our sign up, we're going to enter the fields that we want. So we're going to say username and password. So the next thing that we're going to do is just continue on the next line, and we're going to define the token. So we're going to say const token equals response dot that token. And then we're going to also add in our set username and now set password to store the respective values. So we're going to say set username and then set password. password. Awesome. And then right underneath it, we are going to say fetch users once again. That way we can refetch it, and just that part gets re-rendered. Now we are going to use navigate, and we want it to redirect to our account page. Perfect. So now the next thing that we want is we want an alert just to let the user know that they've been successfully logged in. So we can type in login successful, and then right underneath the navigate, we can write window.location.reload. And basically, I've noticed what happens is once you sign on, you're gonna have to reload the page, but just type in window.location.reload helps doing that automatically. And then lastly, we are going to make the token. So we're gonna say local storage dot set item, and then token, just like that, and then token. So now we're just going to make a catch as of everything, make sure that there are no errors. That way, if there are any errors, we can just go ahead and try to fix it. So we're gonna make the error say login error. And as you can see, there's no errors here. Awesome. And let's just go down and let's just change this sign up button to login, and just refresh it. And why isn't it changing? Oh, that's because it's not there. Oh yeah, actually that's supposed to be login, and now the button, we can just change it to login. Cool. And now you can see sign up page and login page. Perfect. With our hover. Now the last few things that we're going to do is just for the form, we're going to add our on submit, and then we're going to add our handle login. So we're going to type in handle login, and then for our input, username, that's going to stay the same, username, that's going to stay the same as well, and this is going to stay the same as well. And if you go to our password, type password, placeholder password, value is going to be the password, and then on change is also going to be set password. So we can just leave that as well. And once again, this really, the set password, what we're doing here is using the event.target.value. So whenever a user types in here and types in here, when they hit login, we want it to save in their respective fields. So the username at login, the username is going to go to the set username, and then the password is going to go to set password. And then on submit, it's going to be taken to, we just refreshed, and it's going to be submitted to your API here. It's going to say test and then password. Awesome. And lastly, we have our button here, and we can just leave it as type submit because it's still part of the form here, and we should be good to go. So let's go and test it out here. So let's just refresh, and for the username field, it was test, and then for the password, it was password. Fingers crossed, and look at that, guys, login successful. And now once we click OK, it should take us directly to our account. Nice. Perfect, guys. Look at that. Now we are inside of our account. So now that we can see that everything's pretty much working, which is great, now we just want to make sure that the account page or the user's account page is protected. That way, not everybody could just go into their account. So the way we go about doing so is we can just go back to our Visual Studio Code and go to the app here, and then we're just going to add a few things here, and then we're just going to add, you can make on the next line, and then we're going to type in const is user signed in, and then we're going to make it important, and then we're going to say local storage dot get item parentheses and in quotes token, just like that. And now what you're going to do is just copy the page that you want protected. So in this case, we're going to copy the account, the whole route. We're going to just delete it for a second, copy and paste it afterwards, but we're going to copy it and then delete it, and then we're going to open the curly brackets, and then we're going to say is user signed in and not money sign and then we paste the account page. So we're asking if the user is signed in, and if they are, we're using the AND operators to render the account page. Awesome. And that's pretty much it for the app here. So now the next thing that we want is we want our navbar, once we're signed in, just to say account and then sign up. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code, and we can go into our navbar, And then we are going to use the use navigate. That way, once the user signs out, clicks on the sign out button, it'll redirect them right to the login page. Or you can do it as well to the home page, but in this case, we'll just have them redirected to the login page. So as everything, we have to import it. So let's just add a use navigate here. And then inside of the function, we're just going to say const equals use navigate, and then in parentheses. Then as well, we're also going to be using, just as we did here, is user signed in. So let's go back to the nav and then let's define it. So we're going to say const is user signed in equals, and then the importance once again, local storage dot get item parentheses and token in quotes. Awesome. Now what we're going to do here is underneath it, we are going to create our handle sign out function. So we're going to say const handle sign out equals, and then just make the function here. And then inside of it, you're going to say local storage dot remove item parentheses token. So what this is saying is once the user is going to click on the sign out button, it's going to remove the token that's stored inside of the local storage. And then we want it to navigate or redirect to the login page. And that's it for the function. So now what we can add is we can just do this here. So underneath the UL here, you can just open curly brackets, and then you can type in is user signed in question mark and then parentheses. And then you're going to make fragments. And then this is where you're going to input when the user is signed in. So we can go ahead and just type in, let's just do this here. Let's just copy this. And I'll explain a little bit more as well. Let me just finish this off. And then we're going to say account. And this one, we want it to be an account. And then right underneath it, we want it to be an LI. And we want it to be a button for our sign out. So we're going to say sign out. And then what we can do is we can just, not the class, it's going to be the onClick. And then we are going to type in our handle sign out function here. So on click, we wanted to run the handle sign out function, which is this, deleting the token and then navigating or redirecting the user to the login page. Awesome. So now once we have this done, the only thing left to do is just come to this parentheses here and then just add the colon and then open another parentheses once again, just like that. And then don't forget to make the fragments. And then inside of the fragments, you can just copy and paste or move up the login and sign up. Let me just move this here and perfect. So basically what we just did here is we're telling it, so if the user signed in, and if the user is signed in, the only two pages that we want rendered is our account and our, well, not page, but our sign out button. We want it to be rendered. And if they are not signed in, we want it to show our login and sign up page. So as you can see, look at that, guys, we have our account and sign up. So let's just go ahead and sign out. Perfect. So as you can see, we were redirected right to the login page. And let's just go ahead and sign up once, login once again. So we're going to say test, password, login successful. Perfect. The page rendered. We are in our account page and everything's working. So let's say we wanted to go here to the home page. It works. We can just say account, and look at that, guys, it's protected. Now let's just double check if it really is. So once, as you can see, we typed in account while we were signed in and we were able to go into our account. So if we just go sign out and we type in account, it shouldn't take us anywhere or take us to a blank page. But look at that, guys. Now you can see that it's protected. It says no routes matched, which means it's basically hiding it, which is pretty awesome. And it's definitely great to have on a website, especially if you want to just protect the information and the data of the user as well. Awesome. So now just what we can do here, the last few things that we can do is we just want to make sure we finish everything off with just making the home page, just styling it up just a little bit, nothing too crazy. So with this div here, we're going to just make it class view full h screen. And then BG, of course, delete this and go back here. Awesome. And now we want the text to be white inside of the div. We want it to be flexed, justify in the center, and then moved to the center, items center. Awesome. And then lastly, this is where we can just input our h2, and then we can just style it with class text, make it bigger, text 3XL, and let's just say make it home, or home in caps. Awesome, guys. And lastly, we can just copy this whole thing and then just go to your account page here, and let's just style that up as well. We want it to be the same thing, so that's why I'm just copying and pasting it here, and then we can call this account, and then just refresh it, and let's just give it a test here, guys. So let's sign up. We're signing up. We're going to go to email. We're going to say user@user.com, username user, and the password password. The sign up button, registration successful. Okay, change your password, of course. Thanks, Google Chrome. And now we can go ahead and enter that username and password that we just created. So we're going to say user and then password. Login successful. Perfect. Okay. And look at that, guys. It takes us right to our account. That's pretty awesome, right? And now if you wanted to add any links or anything or any other pages in your navbar, you can go ahead and do so and not have to worry about the user being signed out automatically. But remember, there is a time limit of 1 hour where the user is going to be automatically signed out because of the session. But pretty much that's pretty much it, guys. It's such a great project, and I hope you guys really learn from it. And now you guys are able to make a website that includes user authentication, which is very important. All right, guys. So until the next time, thank you so much for watching, and see you then.